Hello.
It's me. I'm back in the big boss chair. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hi. Nice to see you.
And you. Welcome to Beside the Rookery for a fireside chat about Cthulhu Awakens, your latest Kickstarter, which I'm really excited to be talking to you about. And I'm really grateful for you joining you what is presumably the middle of your day and the end of mine.
Well, I'm always happy to gab with you and Andy. So.
Zoltan has joined us. Good evening, Zoltan. Welcome to the stream. So we've got quite a few questions that are pre-submitted. We might get the other Andy joining us, Andy Leask, because he's a big Cthulhu Mythos fan. Mm-hmm. So he might pop in to ask his own questions. I've got a few of my own alongside the ones that have been pre-submitted. But I was thinking we could just get into it and chat a little bit about the Kickstarter. First of all, we've got a very generic question, which is why Cthulhu again? What is the enduring appeal of Cthulhu as a mythos?
Well, it's funny because it's gaming that really helped spread the knowledge and love that people have for Cthulhu. So basically, it was our opportunity to do like the Green Ronin take on the mythos. And we wanted to marry it to our adventure game engine, which is powers most of our games now, like Fantasy Age, Modern Age, The Expanse, and Blue Rose. So it started life as a source book for Modern Age, actually. And then at a certain point, we were like, this would just be better as a standalone game. So you don't have to buy one game to then get the mythos stuff that you want. So then that made the book way bigger, but also allowed us to customize and add special rules and things like that to deal with cosmic horror and the like. So that was our basic impetus.
And Kilishandra asks, why should I go with Cthulhu Awakens as my cosmic horror RPG of choice? What makes it different? What makes it special?
Well, I mean, for a start, there's the system. The adventure game engine is quite flexible. It's got a stunt system that is really dynamic and leads to unexpected and fun things happening regularly. But it's also easy to adapt. So like if you've played any of our Age games before, you will be able to pick up this one like in no time. So if you have that familiarity, it's like an easy step for you. If you don't have that familiarity, I think we have an interesting take on the mythos, where basically we've gone back to public domain sources. So, Lovecraft, Robert Chambers, things like that. And then built on that. And so the game takes place in what's called the Weird Century, which is, 1920s to today. And the whole era is available for play just with the core rulebook. And we've built out both a prehistory, going back to the alien colonization of Earth, millions and millions of years ago, to taking the 1920s stuff people are very familiar with from Lovecraft, and then expanding that out by adding new elements and things like that. So that's
it sounds really cool. Andy, our forever GM, loves like a flashback and a flash forward and jumping about, and it strikes me that this would be amazing to do that. So to play like your ancestors in the 1920s and see them progress through, and then maybe play like grandchildren, great grandchildren now, and have some kind of like cool, epic, I don't know, generation spanning adventure would be pretty cool. And it sounds like if you can play the whole century, it would really lend itself to that.
Yeah, you could certainly do like a legacy type of campaign where you start in the 20s and then, you play through different decades as descendants, allies, that kind of stuff. The setting also, has like time travel built into it. through the Yithians and other ways. So it's also possible you can do like a flashback adventure or something
That
like
would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to pop up the that is the link if anyone was wondering, and just that's it right there. Just have a chat. It's not your first rodeo, Green Ronin, into the Kickstarter game, so people can expect a pretty slick operation by now.
Yeah, I think our first one was in 2013, I want to say.
Yeah.
So yes, we've been doing these for a while.
Let's have a look at the other questions. So John Pick is asking, are there likely to be future supplements or adventures after the Kickstarter is completed and shipped?
Yes, and in fact, some of that is baked into the Kickstarter itself. So one of the stretch goals is something called Weirdness Overflowing. And that started as basically material that we liked, but we couldn't actually fit into a core rulebook that was already over 300 pages. So we want to find a home for that stuff. But now, the idea is that will grow to become a full-on supplement on its own. And we're unlocking pieces of that as stretch goals in the campaign. Yeah. So the first thing that we unlocked was sort of a deeper dive on cults of the mythos. And then the cool thing we've got coming up is an expansion of the idea of the demimons. And that is basically like alternate realities that you can travel through something called the corridor. And it lets you go to other times, but also, other alternate times. So you can visit a future version of New York City that's still New Amsterdam, for example. So that Demimons section will blow out what's in the core rulebook into a much bigger section. And we're also doing a zine as part of this.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called Dread Crawls. And it's essentially a series of like adventure generators. So
okay.
Yeah. So
as it's a zine, it's kind of like flashing back to the pulp horror roots of the mythos, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the things about the mythos is that even in the 20s and 30s, there were all these other authors in Lovecraft Circle who played with it. And essentially, like, we're just taking part in that legacy, like lots of people have developed mythos ideas, over the last century. So
we've got a couple of questions that are related. I'll flash them both up because I think, like, to answer one, you kind of need to answer the other.
Okay.
One of them is, what do you consider the problematic parts of the Cthulhu? I can't say the words tonight. It's been a very long day. To be. And then Kellish Anderson, and how have you dealt with those problematic elements?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest problematic element of Lovecraft is that he was a racist white supremacist. So, obviously we're not about that at all. So we didn't want to carry forward, some of the sort of racist ideas that Lovecraft put in his stories. Honestly, like a lot of his fear of like the other is associated with not white people, and that is not going to cut it in the current day, or any day ideally, but particularly
neither should it.
Yeah. So basically, what we've done about that is, we use those sources. And we take the idea that they are done by unreliable narrators, and the unreliable narrators put their own biases into the material, but that's not necessarily, what's true about the mythos. So, any stuff that leans that way is, that was just, this racist guy in the 1920s, baking that in, and it doesn't, that's not the true nature of the mythos and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And like building on that and thinking of it more positively, what Kilishandra would like to know, have you taken any unique angles with your approach to presenting the mythos?
Well, sure. I mean, a lot of it was like developing the new stuff that we were adding. So the idea with Cthulhu Awakens is that it can support like a whole number of genres. So it's not just like, oh, you're unraveling these mysteries sort of thing. Like you can do all kinds of stuff. You could do mythos stuff during the Cold War, and like how were different cults interacting with, the Cold War showdown and this sort of thing. Then in the things that we added some new sort of frameworks to help the characters get involved in things. So one of them is what's called the Misty Valley Junior College. And it is what in America is referred to as a historically black college, which basically means that after the Civil War ended in 1865 and before the civil rights stuff of 1864, any black-oriented college or university has this designation now.
Okay.
And they were basically founded all throughout that period to help educate people who were being frozen out of the extremely white American university system. So the idea within the setting is that this was founded, near Arkham, and it's people who perhaps would have gone to Arkham University if they were able to, but instead they had this alternate institution, and it too, got involved in the mythos research and things like that, but through a different lens. And that's one of the organizations you can like affiliate yourself with your player character group. Yeah.
I just think that it sounds like there's so many options in terms of the storytelling with that long stretch of history. Like so many interesting things happen that what would they be like with a mythos slant on them? Just like that, I'm already like plotting like, oh, you could do that. You could do this. What would that mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and as we're doing adventures, we're trying to spread them out over time. So, Steve Kenson is writing one that involves a modern day internet influencer, which should be good fun. And then some of the stuff we have as stretch goals are, like here's an adventure set in the 1960s. I'm writing one for what's going to be the quick start that is set in 1930s France, in which you get to both deal with the mythos and punch fascists. So,
Well, I was going to say, if you're not writing one that is punching fascists adjacent, then I don't know what's wrong in the world. Like, I would be slightly disappointed. So,
yes,
all is right with this Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I thought France was a fun place to do it because there's a lot of history there. With these right-wing leagues in the early 30s in France that isn't really well known here. So I thought it would be a fun thing to explore, as well as...
Yeah, the Spanish Civil War would be interesting with the free leagues on one side and the right-wing leagues on the other, and that whole, that's not, I think, also not a very well-known part of history. The interplay of the volunteer leagues that went over from various different European countries in the Spanish Civil War, that would be quite interesting. I think to explore that as well.
I mean, honestly, I felt that we're in sort of a Spanish Civil War moment, like right now with what's going on in Ukraine.
Well, that's why it came to mind, because I was talking with Andy Law and I say Andy Law, like I just have to distinguish him. I don't call him that in everyday life. And I was saying, it does very much feel like that. And it did bring it back to the front of my mind and learning about it at school.
Yeah, well, Republican forces were the legitimate government and they were crying out to the UK and to America for aid. And they decided to be neutral while at the same time, Nazi Germany and fascist Italy were sending troops and equipment and all this stuff to support the fascists. So it's a little uncomfortable now to see Ukraine, basically like begging the West to get more involved. But of course, nuclear weapons complicate things, and I've gone way far from our topics. So.
Wow. Yeah, we have gone very far from our topic.
It's like it's on my mind or something.
It is, yeah. Well, it's on my mind too. I'm sure it's on lots of people's minds. So we were talking before the stream started about the development team. So who's the development team on this one? You're not all in one location, are you? The Green Ronin is very much like scattered across time zones and places.
Well, yeah, I mean, just Green Ronin itself, like we don't have an office at all. We are spread out all over the US and even Canada. So, like we do weekly meetings over Zoom so we can see each other's faces and stuff. But then also, we got a bunch of freelancers to work on this, obviously. Malcolm Shepard is the developer of the game. But we hired a bunch of other people. We've got Monty Lin, Khaldun Khalil, Daniel Lauzon, Sharang Biswaz, David Castro, Liz. I've never actually heard her name pronounced, so
you regret your life choice.
Be very bad for me.
You should have sent me the list, and then I could have read it out. And you could have been like, "Oh, you're so bad at pronouncing people's names."
Radical. There we go. Well, probably that's not correct, but my apologies, Liz. So we've got a big team who helped develop this in various different ways.
Cool. So when do you expect it to ship? How long's left on it? 14 days, is that right?
How long is what?
Sorry, I'll start that again and ask a proper question. How long is left on the Kickstarter? So how long do people have to contribute?
So it's less than 2 weeks now. It ends on the 23rd at 8 p.m. Pacific time.
Excellent. We'll bring the link back up again.
Mm-hmm.
And then once it's complete, how long, when is like delivery planned to be? What's the usual?
So what we promised in the Kickstarter is January. The game is written and in editing now, so we're hoping to actually get it out more towards the fall. But one of the things we've learned about Kickstarter is you should under-promise and over-deliver rather than the other way. So
it's a really great opportunity for people to get either a Halloween present, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever your winter festival of choice is, or to start a new game in the new year.
Yeah.
Could be any of those things.
That's right.
So, yeah,
could Cthulhu Awaken in 2023?
Yeah, who knows?
Stay tuned.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of some good resolutions that you could make. This year, I will plaster all my walls so there are no corners and the Hounds of Tindalos can't get into my house. Oh, and Zoltan's asking, what about PDF delivery, as that's usually faster?
Yeah, that will be a couple months before the print version is done. Particularly now, in light of all the knock-on effects of COVID, printing is just slower. So, yeah, the PDF will be done before that, and it'll be distributed through BackerKit, who we're using as the pledge manager. We'll also take late pledges there. So that is a possibility if you don't have the money now, or perhaps have some sort of problem with Kickstarter, whatever that could be. You got options. So.
Yeah, because I think last time you were on, was that like in 2021? And we were talking about the challenges of printing, of paper, of like physical delivery, of shipping. I can't remember, but was that around the time, or we were talking about the ship that had got stuck in the canal, in the Suez Canal, and like loads of stuff had been delayed. And I think I remember you saying that there was something on a ship that you were tracking, but then it just kind of wasn't on that ship, but it was on something else.
Yeah, we had some books that shipped from Lithuania, and they got to New Jersey, and then we just didn't know where they were for a month. You know, so yeah, I mean, it has massively affected international shipping, but also even the domestic U.S. shipping has been affected. As you know, there just hasn't been enough transport available. You're not sure when you can get things on trains, and you know all that. And then there have been subsequent crises. You know, where there's a
all the truckers have been in Canada, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a cardboard shortage right now. So
no way.
Yeah, so we had a Kickstarter that was finally delivering after many years of frustrations, and it got to our fulfillment center, and then it's taking a little longer to ship than we wanted because hunting up cardboard boxes of the right size was actually a challenge. So, and now, I mean, you know, having a war going on in Ukraine also is disrupting international shipping even further. So, joy.
Yeah, Valastair says a cardboard shortage. All right, I surrender. We're all doomed.
Yeah. Now we've pulled all our printing back to North America because for the most part, printing overseas was something that helped on cost but took longer. And so if the shipping makes it no longer a cost savings,
then why would you do it?
No point. Yeah.
There's no point doing it at all.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite part of a Kickstarter? Like, do you like the day before it goes live, the day it goes live, the day it finishes, the day you send it, the day you think of it? What is it?
Well, I like the first day because there's usually an immediate, you know, outpouring of support, and it's fun to just like watch the numbers tick up. You know, then of course it inevitably will slow down. And there's that whole middle period of the Kickstarter where, you know, you're just chipping away and, you know, like going up more slowly. And as you're doing marketing and, you know, all kinds of stuff. Then the last 48 hours is also exciting because, you know, you can click on Kickstarter, like notify me when there's 48 hours to go, which is something I personally often do because I already know I'm interested. I don't need to read a month's worth of updates. So I'll just click that and back it at the end. And a lot of people are that way. So then, you know, as those notifications go out, but then also, you know, it becomes like you need to back this now, you know, then the numbers zoom up again. And that's nice. And then fulfilling things, also good. Yeah. You know, we've run several crowdfunders over the COVID period, and those all went pretty smoothly. We were able to deliver everything for those within a year, so it's been good.
How do you feel about crowdfunding? Do you think it's brought something to Green Ronin and to the industry that has been positive, worthwhile? Because sometimes it can be frustrating.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'm a simple man when it comes to things like, you know, selling one's creative work. Like my tendency is to be like, here's a thing that we made, please buy it, you know, and Kickstarter is so much a marketing campaign. You know, it's really like 30 or more days of just, you know, banging on and on about something. But, you know, when it hits, it's really helpful because, you know, most companies in the game industry historically, you know, have been underfunded, like massively underfunded. So the idea that you can get money in before you commission all the art or, you know, before you send something to print to help with all those expenses, you know, it is great. It's pretty great. And it also lets smaller companies like break out in a way that they would have a very difficult time doing through like the traditional 3-tier system of publisher, distributor, and retailer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like if I look around this room, there's like a Settler of Catan set that is like really, it's wooden and it comes in its own, like the box itself can come apart. I really like that. And there's loads of things in this room that are Kickstarters. This is Andy's room, because as I said at the start, I'm in the big boss chair. It's actually supposed to be our dining room too, but you wouldn't want to see it right now. It's kind of full of stuff. And I think like so much of that wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for crowdfunding. Like it's really liberated a certain type and size of creative force.
Yeah, for sure. I do miss like the earlier days of crowdfunding where you could take an idea to people and find out if they cared. And if they didn't care, you didn't have to waste time and resources trying to make that thing. But enough companies ended up burning people, that people very much want to see something that's further along
the road
before you even take it to crowdfunder. And then if your crowdfunder fizzles, then you're like, oh no, we just spent 2 years working on this. So it was nice to just have a dream and try to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting, isn't it? That to begin with, it was very much one way, very much like, here's an idea, which was the complete opposite of what you're describing in terms of like being underfunded and having your 3-tier model. And it's sort of come back to more of a balance. So you've kind of come away from that to more of a balance where the consumer's kind of like, okay, I trust these people to deliver this. I want to know and feel that there's something there before I commit my money.
Yeah, I mean, one of our early Kickstarters was to do a new version of our Freeport City of Adventure setting. And it was specifically for the Pathfinder rules, and it was meant to be like the most comprehensive book that we had done. And that ended up being 544 pages. And we wouldn't have done that if we didn't know from Kickstarter, people want this. I wouldn't today write a 544 page book, or put one together and then take it to Kickstarter, because that you're taking a huge gamble.
We've had a comment from my biggest fan. I hear Freeport has good maps. I was actually going to say, like, I think the Freeport map is behind me, but then I always get Andy's maps mixed up, and I was like, I'm going to have to look round and just check if that is indeed. Oh yeah, it's the Freeport map.
Yes. Andy Law has been sort of our main Freeport cartographer since 2007, something like that. So
yeah, it's funny because our daughter was only a toddler when he started doing maps for Freeport, which is just crazy to think. And this year she'll go to university. Yeah, it's a good map. It's also got his sticker on it, which you can't read, but which says "Real men are feminists." So
nice.
Hopefully, of you of all people would approve of having that on your map.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, actually, Freeport itself was the first time we dabbled with the mythos, just to bring it full circle. It's a fantasy setting originally designed for D&D, but you can use whatever rules you happen to like. And the idea was to mix sort of classic RPG fantasy with pirates and Lovecraftian horror. So you will find some mythos touches in there. But we don't talk about Cthulhu, for example, but
Andy says that's the map for the Pathfinder version. Thank you very much. He's feeding me information.
Still the biggest book we've ever published.
Is it the biggest?
Yep.
Yeah. What's the smallest?
The smallest thing we've done is we did these character record folios. This started with in the D20 era, where basically we designed a 16-page character sheet, with a cover on it. And so the idea was if you were playing a campaign, you could track your character with all sorts of space to add what adventures you had, and as your character expanded and all that. And we sold, I don't know, like 50,000 copies of that or something. It was kind of loony, but sadly, I think the day of those are done, because people much more use virtual tabletops and just other electronic ways to track their characters now.
So here's a question that Roderick had submitted. So given the Cthulhu mythos now appears in many different RPG systems and different systems work better for different settings, how does it synergize with the AGE system compared to others?
So, for example, we took certain systems from other AGE games and then expanded them or modified them to sync up with mythos ideas. So in Blue Rose, we had this whole system for relationships, because that's the role-playing game of romantic fantasy. Obviously, relationships going to be a part of that, and those were mostly interpersonal in nature. And so we've changed those in Cthulhu to be what are called bonds, which are similar, but can represent more things like deeply held beliefs and that sort of stuff. And we've also introduced the idea of what are called external bonds, which is something else having a relationship with you that you don't control per se. And the GM can, invoke that to make various things happen.
like a mythical stalker.
Well, it could just be like an organization that considers you an enemy, or it could be something not of this earth. Who knows?
Yeah, I was thinking, have I been touched by a god?
Yeah, and actually, that's another thing about it is we had introduced the idea of distortions in our modern age game, which is what this is based on, and that was a way to deal with horror. And so, of course, we want to bring that in, and again, customize it for cosmic horror. And so that's the system that we use to deal with what I refer to as the literary madness that you find in Lovecraft all the time. Like, that is sanity fled and all stuff. And in Cthulhu Awakens, it's not about mental illness. Like, that's not what's happening. So the distortion system, like when you experience something related to the mythos and you begin to understand it, you're trying to understand a completely alien psychology and way of looking at the universe. And the more you understand that, the more like unhooked you become from general reality. And so you have, after certain events and things, you get these distortions that just disconnect you from what most people consider to be reality, because you are now taking on some of the mindset of these ancient aliens and things like that. So that's what we do, instead of taking Lovecraft at his word, I guess, and being like, oh, you've just lost your marbles now. Like, that's we didn't think that was the way to go for this.
Yeah, so it's more like, when you describe what a 3-dimensional creature would look like to a 2-dimensional creature, for example. It's kind of like that, but what it's like for a 3-dimensional creature like us to imagine a 4-dimensional creature, but now you're actually starting to see the 4-dimensional creature for more than just what it is.
Yeah, and it makes it hard for you to look at the normal world and see it in the same way. Yeah, so that's the idea with Cthulhu Awakens.
Yeah, and I suppose that would, to come back to Kilishandra's question, that would be quite a unique angle with your approach to presenting it. That you've taken that aspect of literary madness and thought about how to present it in a different way. Yeah.
I mean, people with mental health issues are stigmatized enough. We don't need to to associate
Yeah.
cosmic horror with the actual
Yeah.
struggles of people, basically.
Yeah, no, and as someone with a like a mental health illness I manage, I think it's quite nice not to hear about a game where you receive what I might be managing like as a problem for you through play, if you know what I mean. It
Mhm.
always feels a little bit like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a fine line to walk in settings that are really horrible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things about Cthulhu Awakens, it is specifically tied to mythos events. So it's like you might be chased around by a serial killer with a knife, but that's not going to lead you to having any distortions because that's just a maniac, a killer. But that's a regular human thing, like we all know about serial killers, endless TV shows, endless books. So that's not the sort of thing that's going to lead to distortions in the game. It's specifically when you deal with the mythos.
Cool. And is there anything else that you think is particularly unique or unusual in the way that you're approaching this one?
Well, I mean, we make changes to things. So some of basically, if you have previous mythos knowledge, some of that's true, but don't count on it. Like there's going to be surprises for you. So yeah. Some things, so the licensing around Cthulhu is extremely convoluted. The Lovecraft stuff is public domain, but there are a lot of things that people who've gotten into the mythos through gaming consider to be like a core part of H.P. Lovecraft's vision that were actually like added later by other people like August Derleth and so on. And so a lot of that stuff is not in the public domain and requires complicated licensing agreements if you want to include it. And a lot of that stuff is under license already, and we didn't really care to navigate those waters. So we just stuck with the public domain material for those reasons, but also, because it lets us play with the setting more.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't really thought of that, but yeah, that would be a challenge you wouldn't just have to know your Lovecraft, you'd have to know every iteration of every game that had come. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. So thankfully, Malcolm, our developer, had a very good sense of what was okay to use and what was not. And then, we've had some assistance from friends in the industry as well, helping us make sure we don't tread on anything.
Is he really like steeped in Lovecraftian knowledge? Yeah.
Yeah, Malcolm knows way more about the mythos than I do. I mean, I'm not going to front. Yeah.
That's good to have your developer be fully immersed in your setting.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got any more questions in the chat at the moment. If you do have one, please drop one in. And I will bring up the link again so people have it, and it's on YouTube afterwards. It's been really great chatting to you though, Chris, about it, as it always is. But yeah, always love to hear what your new projects are and hear news from the West Coast.
Yes. Yeah, well, we got a lot of things in the works. So, this is obvious.
What will be next after this? Can you tell us? Is it a secret?
Well, so we've been working on a game based on N.K. Jemison's 5th season series of novels, which are terrific. And so you'll be hearing something about that this summer. Let's just say.
How do we feel about capes? I love a cape.
My stepdaughter has a capelet, and she also likes swords, and so she was going to some event, and she wore a capelet in one of her swords, and good book.
Are we talking like a little cape? When you say a capelet, you mean like a one that comes down to about that would be a bolero if it wasn't a cape, sort of that length.
Yeah, like halfway down.
Yeah, I've got a really good cape that I got at a vintage store, which is like originally from Selfridges of London, like I don't know, in the 50s or the 60s. It's proper vintage, and it is the best cape ever. I also have a number of other capes and capelets. I'm a bit of a cape fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The only problem is, though, they're really hard to wear like a backpack. So with a cape, why would you? Like, you may ask, why would you wear a backpack, Lindsay? Well, sometimes I walk to work in my cape.
Right.
And, I need to take a bag with me.
Yeah.
Cape.
They're making a comeback.
From the Spanish Civil War to capes. I do think capes will make a regular comeback because they are the best outerwear solution.
Yeah.
As long as you've got a cozy jumper on, because they can leave your arms a bit cold.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to say for robes as well, right? So.
No misunderstanding. Yeah, and a cape owner.
Yeah.
Ballistairs distraught. Well, I'm sorry. I've got cloaks too, if that helps.
Well, you're ready.
Yeah, I'm all ready.
Yeah.
I've got all sorts of I've got quite a lot of jackets. I do collect them. Like, I don't actually collect them, but I do have a lot of jackets.
Yeah. Well, with my love of history, there are some like historical styles that I like, but I work in tabletop role playing, so I'm not rushing out to buy, vintage clothing.
Yeah, I wish I could afford some proper vintage clothing. But no. What's a gnome wearing a cape called? A kite. Thanks for that.
Regarding other stuff that we're doing, our next book for the Expanse RPG is nearly finished. It's called Beyond the Ring. So that's the core game that we did takes place between the events of the first and the second novel. And so this is the first book that's going to advance that timeline. So now what are called the ring gates are opened, and there's 1,100 or something gates that lead to different systems, and all these ships go out to explore and all this sort of stuff. So that's what this book explores, basically opening up a new style of adventure for you, writing up some of the systems talked about in the books, then adding a bunch of new ones. There's a whole system in it for running your own colony on one of these planets.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's cool. So that is we're just tightening some things up right now, but we should be able to release the PDF and send it to print very soon. And then we've got another book that is adventures for our Blue Rose game. We had previously done one called Six of Swords. This one's called Six of Cups.
Nice.
Yeah.
I really want Andy to run us a Blue Rose game because it's like my favorite game I've never played.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, I really want to play this game. He bought it for me as a present and everything. I'm like, I love this game. It's so beautiful. I've never actually played it yet. I like to think that that's because every game I play, at its core in my heart, is kind of Blue Rose.
Oh, I see.
Everyone else is playing and I'm like playing Blue Rose.
Mm-hmm.
Wifrit, but with Blue Rose. A layer of Blue Rose in my Wifrit world.
Well, why not?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking, as I say, it's my favorite game I've never played. And actually, there's quite a few games I haven't played, so that is higher praise than at first it might sound.
Well, the funny thing is, I've run Blue Rose, but I haven't actually got to play it. So I'm one of those people who tends to be the game master.
Yeah.
So
I'm never a games master. It would go wrong. It would be like that episode, the episode of Rick and Morty, Never Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
Where Rick asks Morty in a moment of stress to like tell a story that only involves women, and he just really, it's a terrible story. That would be me as a kid. So Infinite Saxon asks, apologies if this has been asked already, how does the Cthulhu setting in the 21st century deal with the narrative problems posed by mobile phones and CCTV?
Well, I mean, you can't expect creatures from other dimensions or the depths of prehistory or what have you to really be undone by CCTV or a cell phone. That's my answer. Obviously, it makes surface level research a lot faster than somebody in the 1930s could do. But when you're talking about finding hidden information, there's not going to be a website. It's just like deep mythos lore. Click here.
It's hardly likely get to be on the wiki article, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Or if honestly, it's like be hidden somehow.
The internet has become more and more useless as it's gone on, because you're trying to search on something, and there's all kinds of unrelated stuff just shitting up your search results. And the like, oh, here's the same book on 14 different pages, and you're like, could I get an actual review somewhere that's like not for sale? And
yeah, I was thinking that the other day because I was looking through a whole selection of books, because we do have a lot of books, and thinking, do I want to keep this? And of course the answer was yes. But before I answered myself, yes, of course you want to keep that book, I was thinking, like, I had just like random books. Like, I don't know, you probably wouldn't have had like Usborne books in America, but we had these Usborne books, and like your mums would have Usborne book parties, and you'd get to like, they would buy books at them and you'd get to buy books, and they would
I see. Yeah.
Stuff. You like a book club kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I had like the Usborne survival guide, and I was like, it's all about like surviving in the outdoors. Like how do you shield yourself from the sun? And it's got a really bad picture of a kid with like their hair in front of their face as a sunscreen. And I was like, do I really need this? And I was like, what if there was an apocalypse and I didn't have access to the internet? I might need all these books.
Right. Yeah.
Especially this one that tells me how to protect my face from the sun.
Well, that's why Kate has her copy of the Zombie Survival Guide in print. So.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, maybe I need like more books on plumbing, being an electrician. Like, you've got to think of these practical things in an apocalypse.
Yeah, over here we had the Scholastic book program, which lets you order stuff through your school. There's also like bookmobiles and things like that. But a lot of it was aimed at whatever your grade was. But it's actually how I first read All Quiet on the Western Front. I got it through Scholastic at my elementary school. So
I feel like Clifford, the big red dog, had something to do with Scholastic originally.
Oh, maybe.
I feel like the original cartoons that I saw had that logo or that word on it somewhere. We had book clubs too, but I can't remember what they were called. But like they still have them at primary schools now, where you like the kids get to go along and buy a book and then spend their pocket money on some like random trash that goes alongside this book.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, an eraser that doesn't work. Yeah, so Infinite Saxon says, search Cthulhu on Google and get advertised with the existing piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just to go back to that CCTV and mobile phone, that it just feels like a bit like a vampire potential situation. Like it wouldn't show, it would just for some reason randomly not record. Like, technology is not going to do what you need it to do.
Well, and the other thing to remember is that the internet has become the place where all conspiracy theories live on forever. And so, if you're doing searches, you're going to just find all sorts of stuff that is just
absolutely
made up nonsense. And you don't know, like, what, because there are conspiracies, in the real world, but, in Cthulhu Awakens particularly. So, what are you reading? How much truth is there to it?
Yeah. So it's been great talking to you. Is there anything else you wanted to say to the viewers before we wrap up?
Well, I would say take a look at the Kickstarter page. We've continued to do updates. So if you look through the updates, there's a lot of additional information you can find out about the game. So basically, there's more than the front page. And the other thing I would say is that because of all the stretch goals that have been unlocked, you get more for your money compared to like the first day. So, one of the things we've been doing as stretch goals is giving you free PDFs for Modern Age and some of its supplements.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you spend like $30 on a PDF of Cthulhu Awakens, you're also going to get the Modern Age book itself and Enemies and Allies and some other books like that. So it's a pretty good deal for that.
It's a bargain.
Yeah.
So get on over there right now. Click on the link.
And they've also made the book bigger.
Yeah.
So, there's now going to be 2 adventures that are in the book. So, it's a fully complete role-playing game and with 2 adventures to get you started. And we'll be announcing another cool thing on Monday. So
okay. Look out for that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's always a pleasure to have you on our little show. And I look forward to having you on again, hopefully in the future, to talk about your next exciting project or to talk about how the fulfillment is going of this.
Oh, yeah. Well, always a pleasure. Glad we could chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone in the chat. And we'll see you all on Saturday, as always, for our next installment of Inside the Rookery, which this Saturday we've got James Wallace coming on to chat to us. Yeah.
My old friend.
James of old, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So we will see you all soon. Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you.
Rookers. Speak soon.